this call today. So if you need to come back, we'll post it on the website. If you need to revisit this or share this with other staff, you could do that too. We'll link it on our website. All right, so we're going to get started. I really don't think this is going to take but 30 minutes. So eat your lunch and we'll get going here. So here's the link. Hopefully all of you have can see the GPR at a glance document in front of you. I'll quickly go over this, and then I'm going to navigate over to the actual reporting document and then the Encore page. So here we go. Hopefully all of you have received your username and password at this point. If you have issues or challenges, please let your program officer know. If you need to give other staff access for GPR reporting, it's your requirement to do that. There's no need to contact us to do that. All of the quote administrators should have access at this point, and then you can provide contact or create accounts for anyone else that would need accounts in Encore. So at this point, the new year has gone over in Encore, so now the default program year should be 1920, and that's what you need at this point. All of you should see that when you log in. So to get started for this program year, the first thing you're going to do in Encore, is submit a GPR that will allow us to approve your performance measures. So your performance measures are include 3 elements, and I'll go over that. But this is the first piece. You'll need to select the performance measures only GPR template, and then this will allow you to submit all of your performance measures. And I'll talk a little bit about what those requirements are. And you'll need to do that by the end of this month. So I know some of you are late, because technically it's supposed to be 30 days after your program start date. But I'm giving you a little leeway here. So at the end of this month, we need to make sure your performance measures are in and approved. So your program officer and myself will review all of them and approve them, hopefully by the end of this month. So the performance measures only GPR will include your direct service activity. So that's your measure that was approved in your grant application. And then there's also measures. Each AmeriCorps program in Ohio is required to develop a measure around volunteer engagement and member development. So at minimum, you'll have 3 performance measures in your performance measures only GPR. So thinking forward, GPRs are due during the year quarterly in January, April, July, and October. Now the July and October dates may fluctuate based on your program design. If we have a large sect of programs that finish in the summer, and so I have in recent years just extended those to an August deadline. So they actually only will submit 3 reports a year. But if you, depending on your start and end date of your program, you could have 4, even 5 performance measures. Let's say, GPRs. Let's say you have a no-cost member extension or members serving beyond your original program end date. You may even do a final GPR to capture those activities. So anywhere between 3, 4, and 5 GPRs are submitted a year. The first one will be due January 15th, and that will capture all activities through the end of this year. So because all programs start at varying times of the year, all the way from August to October, we try to encompass that all in one quarter 1 GPR. So all activities through the end of December will be reported in that January 15th. Quarterly GPRs, what are in those? So those are a vital communication piece between you and us in terms of your progress and meeting your performance measures for those minimum of 3 activities around direct service, volunteer engagement, and member development. Some of you may have more than 1 direct service, but all of you will have at least 1 volunteer and 1 member development measure. I think you guys are seeing my, let me close this out. So okay, so there's a couple of changes. There's narrative data. So this is required in addition to your performance measure elements in each GPR. There's narrative data in each GPR, and this is great stories, member experiences, host site experiences, client experiences, partner experiences, and some just additional narrative opportunities to talk about your program and your impact. And right now, I'm reading some great stories from all of your programs from the last year, and a lot of these are we're sharing. We share these on right now. We have a blog, so we've been sharing a lot of those stories on our blog. We've been sharing those with other stakeholders. We'll be sharing those with some of our the legislators. Now we'll communicate if we ever do that, but those are just great ways to communicate with us on some of the unique opportunities your members are experiencing and some great successes of your program year. There's also elements around performance indicators. This is member enrollment and exit data. And this is important to note. In Encore, it talks about, did your program meet CNCS expectations? Your Serve Ohio expectations are different. So around member enrollment, or around particularly member exit, there's a 15-day exit requirement as opposed to the 30 with CNCS. So you will be held to the Serve Ohio standards, not the CNCS standards. So in that information, you should document how you meet the Serve Ohio requirements. And then demographics is submitted only in your last GPR. So whether that you submit that in July, August, October, or another time, you submit demographics only in your program's last GPR. So you do not have to submit demographics at any other time other than in your program's last or final GPR. There's no need to do that. The issue at hand is that Encore is a cumulative system. So once you put data in the system, and it gets added up in with all of the other GPRs. So you could highly inflate data. So I only require this in the last GPR. And then new this year, MSY data is not required. That was always a goofy component. It never really functioned as they wanted it to. So I'm not requiring it this year. You will have to select have no MSY data for this GPR in order to actually submit the GPR. So you have to click in that box in that tab, but you do not have to submit MSY data at any GPR. All right, so here is the requirements. Before I go there, any questions? Hopefully this is a reminder for many of you. Excellent. Okay, so here is the reporting requirements. It's on our website. If you go to serveohio.org, AmeriCorps, Program Director Resources, Program Management Resources. I did move the evaluation and GPR pieces down to the bottom since they were the smallest section. So 2019-20 AmeriCorps GPR reporting requirements. There you go. All right, so these are the due dates. This is important when you are submitting your reports. You should always select whether it's a first, second, or third quarter, and it should match this time frame. So let's say, for example, you, for some reason, didn't submit a second quarter report for some reason, but you're submitting one from January through June. By the July, you would select the third quarter report. So these time frames need to match the quarter report that you're selecting when you submit. And I apologize, but I am going to scroll through this document, so bear with me. So this is just the contents, reporting overview, how we will use this information. As I said, we will use it for stakeholder communications. How can we provide technical assistance in meeting your performance measures? What are the challenges? What are unanticipated issues or factors? And then we did certainly develop reports about Serve Ohio. So for those of you who may be on the newer side around performance measures, this defines and describes what an output and outcome is. Output is what we typically think of in terms of like numbers of individuals served or participating. And then the outcome is to track the benefit of participation, whether that be increased knowledge, increase or change in behavior, new skills. It's also important to know that target numbers and data should all be entered into Encore as actual real numbers. So don't submit percentages. All right, so this goes on to talk a little bit about the programs. Each program will have at minimum 3 performance measures. The direct service activity or intervention. So it must match what's actually an e-grant. So do not make any changes, even if you want to make changes at this point. Perhaps something's happened since you wrote the grant and something's changed. Please only submit what was approved in the grant and we can have a follow-up conversation. If you want to enter additional direct service performance measures that aren't in your grant, we can have that conversation too. Some programs do that just to have record of important initiatives, but let's have a conversation around those if anything is new or changing. Volunteer engagement. So you'll submit a performance measure around the hours and number of volunteers that are engaged on an annual basis. So the output will track the number of volunteers and the outcome will track how many of all of their hours for the program year. And then the third is member development. So, you know, other than hours of training hours, because we have that data already, I think there's a lot of flexibility around what the member development piece can look like. A lot of our programs will do certifications or do a pre and post survey of their members around their service activities and the knowledge they've gained around the issue or the focus area. That's a more ideal scenario than saying our members completed this many hours. We have that data already. No need to re-report on that information. Okay, so when you go to enter the performance measures for approval, this is what you'll do first if you have not done this already. Log into Encore, and instead of sliding through this document, let me pop over to the web page. So OHIO, EncoreReports.com. 1920 is your default year. Select that. You will then select your program from over here, okay? If you have a brand or visual you'd like to include with your account, you can send that to Encore and they'll put it here for you. We don't do that. So you'll find that, and usually it's the program director that's submitting the report. I'm going to log in as staff though. Reporting, approve program reports, approve Encore GPR. Oh, look at all those great reports. Thank you to all of those directors that have submitted all those reports. That's fantastic. So as you see, it says performance measure only. That's what you want it to say. This is normally where the GPR quarter period would be. We don't use mid-year, we do not use end-year, and we do not use in-year extension. You will use performance measures only, and then the quarter report, the 4 and the 5 if needed. Okay. Oh, sorry. All right. It's pretty user friendly. I'm gonna pause the screen for a second. It's pretty user friendly. If you have any questions, this document, the GPR reporting piece, is honestly cut and paste from the website. So all you need to do is follow the information. This is what a report will look like. Normally you'll have in a GPR, because this is a performance measures only tab, this should be, or GPR, this should be the only tab that you have available to fill in information. All you do is add new and enter the output and outcome as approved in your grant. And then you'll enter the volunteer engagement and the member development measures in the same way. So these should be checked because you do not need to put anything in these in this GPR. Here's an example. So you'll fill in all of these pieces. The activity start and end date, those are like your program year, not just for the quarter. And then on average, how many days per week the activity will occur and how many hours. And then save and enter measure. And then you'll go back and do it again for each performance measure that you want to enter. So you have an option when you're entering the measures to select whether it's an output or an outcome. So make sure you do that accurately, please. If it has a related national performance measure code, select that. This is really only relevant for your direct service activities. If there's no related code, there does need to be something in this drop down, unfortunately. So you either put no related code or you find your related code. I think that might be the only drop down or box that has to be filled in. That may not be the most evident for you, but everything else should be evident based on your grant. And then again, the number. So select number, not percent. Nothing should be a percent. Even if in your approved performance measure it says 50% of the children will improve, you still have to equate that to a number. So you select number. Never put a percent. Okay. Yeah, so every output and outcome must have a related national PM code. Okay, so this really walks you through. It's not that hard, but this is what needs to happen first in order for you to even submit a GPR. And this does take some thought. So if you have not completed, if you're a newer program and have not developed a volunteer engagement or member developed performance measure, now's the time to have conversations with your program officers around what that can look like. And let me talk a little bit about what the expectations are for those measures. So volunteer engagement, it tracks the number of volunteers and their hours engaged in AmeriCorps-related program services, events, and activities over the program year. So this is not the number of volunteers that generally come in and out your organization's doors. This is to support the programs that your AmeriCorps members are involved in. So you'll have one output. It'll track the number of unduplicated volunteers engaged during the program year. So you'll come up with a number, let's say 100 volunteers over the year. And then each quarter in your GPR, you'll report on how many new volunteers came in to support your program. The outcome is to track the number of hours. So whether the volunteer came in quarter one or quarter two, you count their hours under the or reported in the output in quarter one or quarter two. You report all of the hours for that quarter in the outcome. So we're looking at how many volunteers you have engaged, unduplicated volunteers you've engaged for the program year, and then how many of those individual volunteers gave hours each quarter. So this is not member hours. Members should not be reported in this performance measure. This is purely community-based volunteers. That can be students at your schools, it can be parents, it can be corporate volunteers. It just cannot be your AmeriCorps members. Now, we look at this on an annual basis of new volunteers is an individual that has not volunteered with your program during the program year. So they may have come last year and helped for Make a Difference Day, and then this year they're coming back for MLK Junior Day. They're still considered a new volunteer for the program year. If you have any questions around what you need to do for tracking and reporting of volunteers in your organization, hopefully it's apparent that we do expect you to track and monitor the use of volunteers within your program to support your AmeriCorps initiative. Doesn't have to be large engagement. Some programs, depending on their location, have better success in engaging volunteers, day to day, or just for special projects or national days of service. So you can make that decision. And then the member development measure. So this is really important to us. Member development is incredibly important for us to know how are you supporting professional development of your members. And here's just some examples. How many members or the number of licenses that members received, how many increased awareness of their service field, how many became a certified tutor or other certifications received, and how many members completed their development plans, for example. Those are all examples. You may have other ones that you would like to use. That is great. I really don't want to see a number of training hours completed. That is not really that is not an ideal performance measure. And like I said, we already have access to that data, so it doesn't give us any new information. All right. Any questions at this point? All right, hearing crickets, we're moving on. So section 4 talks about what you have to put in your GPR. Okay, GPRs encompass all of the below items A through F. So what you'll do is you'll go back to Encore. I'm gonna mute you. So we're going to there's demographics. Again, this is unfortunately it's like the second tab that you see, but it's only required in your last GPR. So in order to submit the GPR, you have to put no demographic data to report. So don't, just because the tab is there does not mean you always have to put information in it. There's a lot of data tracked in demographics, and what they've tried to do is throw every possible item in there that AmeriCorps programs across the country could be tracking. It doesn't mean you have to be tracking it. So like disaster services, only if you're tracking it by your program. Serving military veterans, only if tracked. School turnaround, youth opportunity use, sorry, that's backwards, not applicable to any Ohio program. You do not need to put those data there. For the most part, opportunity use are tracked in another mechanism, and no other programs. There are no school turnaround programs in Ohio. So only if it applies to your program. What you have to do is the number of individuals who apply. This is really the only required item for all programs. So, and again, because you report it in the last GPR, you just keep track of that every year. And in the final report, you tell us how many individuals applied to your program. Underneath this general program demographics, you'll see volunteers. You don't even have to enter that because you're tracking that in your performance measure. The MSY, this is the biggest change this year. You are not required. So select I have no MSY data to report. Performance indicators, this is all about enrollment and exit. Serve Ohio's exit timeline is 15 calendar days. This is different than CNCS. So even though the text says, did you meet CNCS requirement? You should answer did you meet Serve Ohio requirements? And you need to provide data in both fields related to program member enrollment and exit. What's really helpful is when we know why you, or when you put details as to why members were exited or enrolled late or exited late or why they exited. So then there's the performance measure section, and this is where you'll have, under that performance measure tab, you'll see at least 3 rows for each performance measure. MSY and slot information is not required. You do not need to submit that in any of the measures. You may need to put something in there. It seems to be inconsistent on who needs to put something in there just to submit. You could put like a 0.1 if you wanted to, just to submit, but there's details, or those details are not required. You put data primarily in the output actual and outcome actual sections, and then there's a narrative box that says explanation and corrective action text box. And you can provide details there. Many of you do provide great details, and I appreciate it. So it's pretty minimal in what's needed. But I want to hit some highlights. Data should always be unduplicated data. The system, like I said, is cumulative. If you included a member or a recipient in an output measure in Q1, you're not going to put them again in Q2. You may put them in the outcome element of that performance measure in Q2, but you will not put them again in the output. It is possible for individuals to receive multiple services across performance measures. That's fine. So let's say you have James comes in and he receives financial literacy, and then the next day he comes in and does housing services. And those are 2 of your performance measures. You can count James in both of those services. You just cannot count James in the same performance measure. And it doesn't mean that you always, your programs have a natural flow to things. Many of you have participation requirements or dosage requirements. So you don't necessarily have to report in the outcome. Primarily, I don't see outcome data until at least Q2. So it doesn't, but that's not true forever. That's about 98% of the program. So depending on what the criteria is to be included in the performance measures, whether the output or the outcome, it doesn't mean you always have to have data in those pieces. So it's okay if some elements, it could be okay if some elements are blank. You do not have to put data in every output and outcome unless it meets the criteria for that measure. And the data should all only reflect that time period. So that's why those time frames are really important. Okay, I'm going to go. I think I saw a question. Yes, that's a great question. So yeah, you could do that. I mean, I'm sorry, the question is, I think everyone can see this. Can different members have different development outcomes? So let's say if 10 are getting a certification, but 2 already have it. Yes, you could do that. What I would say, though, is what are you going to do for those other 2? How are you going to continue to develop those members? Perhaps it's that they meet some other development benchmark. Maybe they present at as part of their development plan, they present at an upcoming member training on, what they've done with their certification since then. Something like that. I made that up, but no, we want to make sure that all the members are getting some level of development. So you don't want to, I like them tracking the certification. So yes, you do have to keep that in mind for returning members. The member development piece can be a little tricky, but we do want to make sure they're continuing their education and professional development. So it's worth having a conversation with your program officer to see how other programs have done that. But you want to make sure that all members are getting some level of development. Okay, so I'm not going to read the rest of this document. There's only 2 pages left. This is not a long document. I do expect you to read all of it. It just goes on to explain a little bit more about how you report on the volunteer engagement, which is, again, only new volunteers are engaged for that quarter. But then of new and returning members, how many total volunteer hours were contributed that quarter. And I like to know what and how you engage volunteers, whether it's through a National Day of Service or a special project, community event, one-time event, ongoing activities. It's just helpful to know. And then this just gives a little bit more guidance on the member development. But again, and the member development can be a little tricky on how to kind of like determine that benchmark when somebody has met their desired benchmark for member development. It can be a certification. It can be, a plan of development they come up with to increase their skills. Maybe it's something they want to do. So while there might be variances within your core, your measure can be that all members obtain their program development goals, which can vary based on what the members need to achieve. So you can write it a little vague. So the final pieces are the narratives, and these are required in all the GPRs. You don't have to report on like A, B, and C, but I definitely want to know successes and challenges, impact snapshots, great stories, love great stories. And this is where you can have members or even partners, host site supervisors submit stories around how their quarter's going, something they've accomplished. So don't feel that you as a program director have to submit these stories. It really is a great opportunity to allow your members and partners to highlight the program. And then member experience. This is where you can elaborate on the member development piece too, and any National Days of Service, trainings, leadership opportunities of the member. And then if you have any, this isn't required, but if you have any training or technical assistance you provided with your programs during the year, or any other significant issues or trends, this is where you can put that data. There's some additional narrative text boxes that are below those in Encore. And I think it says perhaps data, it references data. You do not have to put any information in those text boxes. It's overkill. There's no data that's needed in those text boxes. I think I got timed out. Okay, I was just going to show you what that looked like. Any questions while I navigate to that final narrative page? Oh, great. Nothing found. Sorry, we're not going there. All right, on the phone, any calls on the phone or in the text box? Pretty self-explanatory. Only major change this year is the MSY report is not needed. Other than that, same expectations aside from the member development. We really want to see more data and more intentional development of your members other than how many service or training hours they received. Okay, with that, we're going to sign off. If you have any questions, please email or call your program officer. You're very welcome. Thank you. We're looking for a great year. So in the next couple of weeks, we will be in contact. If we have any follow-up items we need around your performance measures, we'll do that. Otherwise, you may just see them being approved in the system, which means you are good to go. If not, we'll have a dialogue around that in the coming weeks. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend, and we'll be in touch.